Subhanallah wa bihamdihi wa bihamdihi wa bihamdihi.
We've entered into the last quarter of the year, and here in America, that means the holiday season. With special food, parties with friends and families, and many more activities to brighten up the winter season. So, what's the harm in that? But let's take a step back and view this from another angle. Outdated traditions, increased immorality, and blindly following corporate greed are no ways to improve society. So let's take a look at the problems and how Islam provides the solution. Today we're looking at Halloween. It's a time of jack-o'-lanterns on porches, spooky decorations, and people dressed up in some pretty strange costumes. Creepy. But why is this tradition even celebrated? Let's get up to speed with history, shall we?
Halloween is a mix of different traditions that have merged over the years, and some historians trace it back to an ancient Celtic festival in Europe, when people would light bonfires and wear costumes to ward off ghosts and the dead, who they believed would come back to haunt them at the end of the summer and at the start of the cold winter months. This was picked up by the Roman Empire, and eventually the Catholic Church designated November 1st as a time to honor All Saints. Soon All Saints' Day incorporated some pagan practices, and the night before became known as All Saints' Evening, or All Hallows' Eve as it's called in some traditions. This eventually became the term we're now familiar with, Halloween. Halloween represents a time in the year when some people believe the boundaries diminish between our world and the world of the dead, and a time when people try to appease dead spirits to avoid bad fortune. Over the centuries, it has turned into a very commercial event, being branded as a fun time to try on costumes and hold community events. But in reality, the history is based on superstition, pagan rituals, and occult practices.
Okay, let's fast forward to today. Did you know that Halloween is a multi-billion-dollar industry in America? It peaked in 2017 when Americans spent $9.1 billion on items such as decorations, food, candy, and costumes. $9.1 billion. Let's put that into perspective. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, in 2019, more than 35 million people in this country struggled with hunger. Instead of spending on Halloween, that $9 billion would go a long way in tackling this issue, which would have positive impacts on all of our communities. Much better than getting sick on too much candy. And that's just looking at it from a worldly perspective. But what about Halloween's impact on our moral and spiritual health?
One of the reasons we don't celebrate Halloween is because of its history. It's related to shirk and idolatry. Now, a lot of people think that its history is something that's old. History doesn't matter. But history does matter. Imagine, just as a hypothetical, that what if the Christians had made a holiday to celebrate the death of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and they distributed candies and sweets to show their happiness. Now, imagine 1,000 years later. Everybody had mostly forgotten about that history. It was just a children's holiday afterwards where children would give each other candy and celebrate and give sweets. Now imagine, would a Muslim ever celebrate that holiday? Of course he wouldn't. Any Muslim who has love for the Prophet ﷺ and respect for him, he would never celebrate that holiday because it is disrespectful, because its history does matter.
Although Halloween can find its traces all the way back to pagan celebrations, what it really is simply today is a marketing masterpiece. It's engineered to drain and squeeze all the money it can from the consumer, from the general public. And the irony is that in this Western world, we claim to have this modern and advanced thinking, and yet we're convinced to dress up like goblins and roam the streets like beggars and create havoc in society. What difference is that than East Africans who are convinced to drink blood, or Persians who are convinced that they should worship fire or the sun? At the end of the day, these marketing schemes have convinced us that somehow this backward thinking fits right into our advanced thinking, and that we should somehow appease ghosts, demons, and we should rely on superstitions.
One of the reasons why we as Ahmadi Muslims don't go trick-or-treating is because it's based in self-respect. The Holy Prophet ﷺ discouraged begging so much that none of the Sahaba would ever beg for anything. He taught that the upper hand is better than the lower hand. So one of the reasons why we don't go trick-or-treating is to preserve that feeling and to maintain what the Holy Prophet ﷺ taught, that out of a sense of self-respect, we never go and beg for something from anybody, even if it's done as a game.
And that's exactly where Islam jumps in and says, look, you should have a moral upliftment not only for the individual, but society at large. And that is why Islam introduces, restraint and discipline and an idea of having an aim towards progress. Because the idea is always to uplift society. And this whole concept of Halloween, well, it takes you back, takes us too far back, in an era long before our intellectual revolution.
The head of the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community spoke about this very topic in great detail.
इनमें ये बातें सिर्फ यहाँ तक नहीं रुकती कि कॉस्ट्यूम पहन के घरों में मांगने चले गए, बल्कि बाज़ बड़े बच्चे फिर ज़बरदस्ती खौफज़दा करने की कोशिश भी करते हैं घर वालों को, और दूसरी बातों में मुलव्वस हो जाते हैं, जुर्मों में भी। और नतीजतन फिर जहाँ वो मुआशरे को, माहौल को डिस्टर्ब कर रहे होते हैं, नुकसान पहुँचा रहे होते हैं, माँ बाप के लिए भी दर्द सर बन जाते हैं, अपनी ज़िंदगी भी बर्बाद कर लेते हैं। इसलिए मैं फिर अहमदियों से कहता हूँ कि इन बातों से बहुत ज़्यादा बचने की ज़रूरत है। अहमदी बच्चों और बड़ों का काम है कि खुदा ताला से ताल्लुक़ बढ़ाएं, जो हमारा मकसद है उसको पहचानें, वो बातें करें जिनके करने का खुदा ताला ने हुक्म दिया है। मगरबी मुआशरे का असर इतना अपने ऊपर तारी ना करें कि बुरे भले की तमीज़ ख़त्म हो जाए, खुदा ताला से ताल्लुक़ और उसकी ज़ात की बड़ाई को ही भूल जाएं और मख्फी शिरक में मुब्तला हो जाएं, और इसकी वजह से फिर ज़ाहिरी शिरक भी होने लग जाते हैं। अल्लाह ताला सबको इससे महफूज रखे।
As Muslims, and especially as Ahmadi Muslims, we need to have a clear idea of what's right and what's wrong. Let's stand out as those who are proud to be different, proud to put their faith before worldly influences. As society wastes away in useless activities while ignoring the social, psychological, and moral implications, we've already got the solution: the true teachings of Islam.